Welcome back to WAAAGH Tactics. We're here to talk about how to start orcs with the Battleforce box, specifically the Stomper Boys. Let's go. So I know many of you have obviously heard how people feel about this box on the internet. People telling you the Stomp is bad, possibly even unplayable, still at 800 points, that there's no use. I'm here to tell you different. So today we're going to talk about how to get this box set going, get you up to 2K points. I'll give my commentary a few points about the combat patrol boxes that you can find in tandem with them, some key combos to look out for if you're going to go into any of these units. I'll give you an example list, and then I'll answer any questions that people have at the end. So let's talk some war tactics. So first, what about the combat patrols? As you know, there is now a new one. So the previous combat patrol was quite compatible, but not ideal. What I mean is that there's a few exceptions to this combat patrol. I'm not in favor of trying to give up, bring it down with my Stompa list. So therefore, the Def Compters aren't ideal, nor is the Def Dread, because the Def Dread isn't exactly where you want it to be in strength. And what it points is, it more like 100 points would be a little more ideal. And I have quotations on the screen. You do get 20 boys, which I actually like with my Stompa kit, and then the War Boss and Mega Armor, which is hard to find in general right now. So if you got that, or if you get it, don't feel bad. It's actually pretty good. The current combat patrol, it's not as compatible, but still viable. As you'll see when we talk about the tactics, you could pretty much do something very similar with the 20 boys. So both are fine. They'll help get you up to 2K points. If you got them, yes, you can still run both of these combat patrols with the Stompa box, and you'll still feel pretty good about it. You'll just need to supplement it a bit, and we'll talk about that with the gits. So contents within the box set and combos to look out for. So right off the bat, for the Battleforce box, you get 10 boys, 10 looters / burners, a truck, a brand new big mech, and a Stompa. So let's talk about a few combos and key units you might want to automatically consider going forward. War Boss, ideally, because he goes good in just about any detachment with multiple units of orcs. So War Boss is never a bad choice, but he's very hard to find at the moment of this recording. Therefore, I will suggest look at AOS models that you can look to convert, make your own kit batches, or even go to the Blood Bowl models. Maybe pick one of those up that looks ideal and big enough as a big War Boss. But you can always go burr, if you know what I'm talking about with the printers, right? War Boss is ideal to get in with your boys, but boys can be run on their own. Sticky objectives are fantastic, so it's always good to have more, and they'll be good for the rest of the edition because boys as the battle line unit are just iconic. So then we have the looters / burners. So everybody has been talking about how looters are now playable. It's very exciting, and that's because you can automatically add a Big Mech with a shock attack gun, or you can add the Big Mech that's in this kit, or even a simple mech on foot. What you want to do here is, if you have the Big Mech with shock attack gun specifically, is get finder goggles or press it fast enhancement in any of these lists that you're putting, right? You could end up running the 10-man looters. What I would suggest is pick this unit combination according to your terrain. Therefore, if you got access to plunging fire, clear lanes of sight so you can actually shoot at objectives, therefore you can take advantage of the full rerolls to hit, possibly that's the best, really the only ideal situation on which you would want to run this combo, but it's a very real combo under the right circumstances. So that's really up to you if you choose to run the big looter brick, but that's something you can look out for if you just want to have it a part of your dread wall, for example. Trucks, one truck is great. Getting more is always good. They're going to be a hard kit to find anyways. Be happy you got the truck. That's a long-term investment that you just did there. Now, the Big Mech himself, we are going to see that people have alternating opinions about this. Sometimes people think it's really cool because unique rule set. Some people think he's actually quite a miss because he doesn't really know what role he's fitting. I'll tell you how to run him in kind of both ways, right? And it's up for you to choose if you want to run him or not, but he's a good substitute or fill-in of points while you're trying to get to your 2K list. So don't be discouraged if you got him. Plus, he's a beautiful model, so that's always good. You can run him with Ludas. That way you can do the combination I spoke of earlier. Or you can actually run him with boys, as if you have the War Boss, you can stick 2 units in there. As you'll be running the Dread WAAAGH, no figure with the Stompa on your list, running the Big Mech, having access to the mech keyword and a unit of boys, specifically a 20-man unit of boys, can become quite interesting. You give them sustain, you give them lethals. That makes them more devastating when they try to come out of wherever they're coming out of, right? So, and last but certainly not least, we have the Stompa. Now, everybody talking down about the Stampa that you hear online, take it with a grain of salt, my friends. Be happy that you got a beautiful centerpiece model that you'll have a good time painting up once you have a hard time putting it together. It's only every, we'll just say, half a decade that the Stampa becomes relevant to any kind of sense or any regard. So be happy that this is the time with the wall and that you will actually be able to run the Stampa in a playable manner and feel good about it, as long as you stick to a couple key points and stuff that we're going to go over in the next slide. So the Stampa is beautiful, but it does require and it does pay the mech tax. So right here underneath, you see that I have a mech. You have to bring the mech if you're bringing the Stampa. Getting it to a 4+ on hit is beautiful with that +1 to hit, and a couple healing potential does help you a little bit. What I will say is, if the combo Stampa did go down to a significant lower point margins, like 600, 650, maybe even 700, people will be running multiple of them, and at that point, you're pretty much playing Imperial Knights. It's messing up with Orks, and I think GW was trying to stay away from that, but 750 would be nice. That way you can offset that mech tax, right? Either way, we are here with what we are here with. But tips for using the Stampa, as this is a very important unit in this box set, this Battleforce box set. You really have to keep in mind on how to use them, regardless of what you hear online. So in a casual game, right off the bat, you got to let people know you're bringing the Stampa to avoid skewed lists, right? Skewed games. One, because you don't want someone to completely tech into destroying you with all of their anti-las cannons just because they heard you got the box set. So talk to them. Hey, you know, you did, what's the math for actually killing me? And two, you don't want them to not be able to kill you, as that is very much not fun for you to just sit there and Imperial Guard people off the table. Have something in between, and that's why the Stampa is actually a feel goods model, because it's very much easy to kill, and in some circumstances too easy to kill. But in the regards of how it works with the Dread Wall, is that we get to kill almost anything in the game, just pretty much anything in the game. And for the most part, you're only using your 3 primary main guns. But the Stampa is beautiful for that reason, is it doesn't leave to a horrible feel mad moment, especially if you talk to people. But at an RTT level, very much able to get this list on the table, or this army on the table. And in that case, Stampa is good. And don't feel bad if you go 0-3, but it does have potential to go 2-1, in my opinion, possibly an RTT. But we have yet to see how the meta looks out. Now, another thing to keep in mind is deploying your Stampa. Now, I would say this is another case where you talk to your opponents. Why? Let me read the hull rule. For models that do not have bases, the word hull is used to mean any part of that model that is closest from the perspective point being measured from note. Note that this may not correspond literal with the area on a vehicle usually termed hull. That means it's not generally just the belly of the Stampa. In literal terms, your big weapon that's sticking out with the cannon, Death Storm cannon, or the big old chainsaw, are actually part of the model that when you're deploying him will come into play. You'll have to try to keep him behind the deployment line. But at the same time, it's because you'll be using it for distance measurement. That's why it's actually, in some cases, depending on your terrain, let's say if you have really tall L-shaped terrains from 8th, 9th edition, or it's WTC, you're playing at your local GameStop and games store, and you don't have space for the Stampa to actually fit because his arm's so big that he's hitting the building behind him. Talk to your opponent and say, I'm not going to measure based off these big weapons. I'm going to go by his actual chassis, his body. And for most cases, your opponent will agree to that just so you can fit them on the table. Of course, talk to your TO at an RTT. But in the literal, raw sense of the term, all parts of your model would have to be behind that deployment line. And that's generally how I play it currently. So can be played like that on GW terrains because he's tall enough to look over it. But that's something for you to keep in mind as you're a new player and you're starting to put him on the table. What are you actually doing here, right? Keep in mind that he is Titanic, so he just has to touch and tag a building. In that cases, you know, that's where the arm benefit might be in play, where you could tag multiple buildings, would be spread out, right? What we see here is he is also, like I spoke of earlier, fragile. Even though he's 800, yes, 800 points, he can easily be killed by a plethora of things in combat. As in range, it would actually take quite a few activations, some good rolls from your enemy units, and some substantial AP to really get through the Stampa in any reliable manner. Can it happen? Yes. Is it going to happen as often as you think? No, not unless the enemy is necessarily teching for you, or you're going into just a strong matchup like an Ironstorm list, for example, right? For the most part, he will be able to tank some of your enemy's anti-tank firepower, and in return he will delete all of theirs. So it is very much up to you to understand that. One thing to keep in mind is he cannot reduce damage by 1. That strat he does not have access to because he is Titanic. One that he does have access to that was very interesting for you is that he can advance and shoot, as well as he gets +2 to his strength characteristic and +1 damage. That's beautiful for his sweep attack. So keep that in mind if you're going into 4 wound models, or maybe a model that has reduced damage and you want to kind of get to a different threshold. This is something you want to keep in mind that could be beautiful, but for the most part, you could be crunching, just straight crunching things with the strength 10. But keep that in mind. These are a couple strats that people do overlook or misunderstand. I think it's a really nice cup of tea. We appreciate that. But for the most part, you're pretty much always going to be using his strats to give him reroll from Daka 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 and bigger shells for bigger gets for the most part. Those are what you're going to be using every strat. That's why it's important that you have CP management. It's very CP hungry. And to be honest, you might even consider CP reroll for his Def Cannon specifically. It's not separate guns, so you do get to reroll all 3 of those dice if you were horrible on the D6. That's why you'll see in my list suggestions, I actually don't suggest big units of killer cans to come and play, or even really a Luda combo in some of the lists that I put forward with the Stampa, because you're not looking to drop CP into those units. The Stampa is going to be using all of your CP, even if it is to keep them alive in some cases. So very much in favor of all your CPs going into your Stampa. That's the cost that you're going to have to take for this, right? And last but not least, not all weapons have to be fired. Now, if you're using bigger shells for bigger gets, there is an exception. But for the most part, you don't want all your weapons shot because you're going to take more mortals than it's worth in return. The exception to this is that if you're fighting something like a greater demon where it's stuck on a 4-up save, right? I won't suggest it to the Catan because if you're using bigger shells for your bigger gets, he still is taking it to damage 1. But if it's if you're really spreading firepower, keep in mind that with the big shooter, one of them you're getting twin linked and such, but you're getting +1 to wound on those. So anything taking a 4-up armor save, sometimes volume is the difference maker, but I really only suggest just if you're really going into something like a greater demon, right? Where its 4-up save is going to be its weakness there, and he can still eat up all that 2 damage, but you do not have to shoot the weapons. Just remember that when you are selecting the shoot, you have to delegate all of the weapons right off the bat. So say them all, main 3 weapons only, and then, at your discretion, utilize his flamers and his big shooters. Now, the Stampa is the focal point of this list, but there are other models that when you go forward with this Battleforce box, you can add to your collection. That way you can move on and graduate to other detachments and other unit combinations. But here are some units to consider when moving forward. For proper potential, you automatically need the mech for this. As for mandatory, in my opinion, as well, as 1 unit of Grats, as you're going to be CP hungry, but you're going to also have a very thin field of units that you can have access to because you're already wasting so many points. So multiple units of Grats might come into play. I found use in using multiple units of Grats because you get more activations. You're really playing for the OC, and you really need to stop some armies from getting behind you. So a lot of screening does help, and at least they're battle line. But I don't really spam them, to be honest. Just 2 to 3, and I'm good. Stormboy units, they're going to be hard to find right now. I know that is, of course, but there are other suggestions you can use. But Stormboys are beautiful because you really need to jump through the terrain, maybe even get an early game charge off. If someone's trying to bait you and move block you, go ahead and get in the skirmish with the boys. But really, they're for scoring. That's what Stormboys are really, really for. 99 out of 10 times. Of course, knobs and mega knobs, they've always been in play. They're even more in play now. Not going to catch you guys off guard. The War Bosses and War Boss Mega Armor, of course, to go into conjunction with that. If you got the Combat Patrol box, you feel even better because you have a War Boss and Mega Armor. Good options. Killer cans in 3-man units are a good option. Ideal option? No. Good option? Yes. You can put it in from reserves. It comes in on the side of the table. It acts as another problem for the enemy unit. I will not spam these because you do not want to give up bring it down necessarily, unless you're really going to be thin on the characters and not giving up assassination as well. Of course, you can just choose by your discretion of what you want to use. Bikers, because Stormboys are hard to find and bikers are still quite durable, not giving your enemy easy small arm fired targets like something like a Stormboy unit might be better to just have them bikers there. They might survive some of that leftover firepower that didn't go into your Stampa. It would be nice. More boys on your list because sticky objectives is a thing. Putting boys out into the objectives, forcing the enemy come out and tag it again. That way your Stampa has something else to shoot then you can go for more boys. So you can't have knobs right away. I know they're hard to get. You can't get War Boss and Mega Armors because they're hard to get. You know, these are the suggestions that you can move towards as you're trying to pick that up. And then trucks. I understand that orc trucks are hard to find. You can find ways to get them from other people, from kit bashing other units. You know, Torox primes are kind of easy to find sometimes online because some test designs don't use them all. So things like that. If you have to, a GSC truck being converted to an orc truck is actually really nice as well. So there are ways to get around it for the trucks. You can use GW plastic for that, and you'll feel good about it. But these are a couple units you want to go for going forward. Mech guns, you can use mech guns, but keep in mind you already have one big gun platform on the field. Adding more things that want to sit back, like I said with the Ludas, aren't necessarily ideal, as they're not going to be taking your CP and you're already going to be shooting with the other units. Of course, Nick Rock can make it on any list. I just didn't mention him because he's going to be on every detachment, on every list ever. And if you can find him, that's good. If you can bash him up, even better, right? So now we'll go forward with just one list example that I wanted to put forward, and that is the future is green. So keep in mind, this is a list where I didn't want to spam too much of anything. I wanted you to be able to take this, run it on the table, possibly win a couple games as you're learning it, and then choose if you want to graduate or get better with this. So let's talk about the future is green. So the big mech. In this list, I did choose to put the Get Finder goggles and the Ludas on it after I did speak of all of the weaknesses and flaws of this. But that's because you're trying to get up to 2,000 points, and I want you to experience it yourself. This combo is very real. You can choose to just drop it and put burners and then drop the Get Finder Get. And you can actually add the big mech into your 20-man unit of boys that's on this list. And we'll talk about that like we did earlier, but that's a flexible option that you can have there. You have the mech, mandatory for the Stompa. A war boss, it will really help you because you're going to be running that 20-man unit of boys on this list. A war boss and mega armor, because if you can, you're going to be running the big unit on this list as you're moving up to 2K. This is something you're going to take to an RTT or play your friend and have a real chance of actually beating him as you're collecting, moving your way up. Of course, any smaller point levels you're playing this, you're collecting as you can, right? Battle line. We do have a 20-man unit of boys, and I am putting that in the Stompa. Now, let me explain before you guys get all caught up. I promise you that as I played it and tested it out, Mega Noms themselves are just unit of noms are just not enough. You need to run up the field, the center of the table, and fill up the space and clear the way for the Stompa to get in the middle of the table. The boys unit does this best. The war boss makes it so you have to actually be a threat. And like I said, the big mech might be an option for that if you're trying to give them access to the mech keyword and actually take advantage of moving through models, right? As that's his special ability. So the 20 boys will actually appreciate that to some degree. Now, why the 20 boys? People, for the most part, are going to take small, cheap chaff, pre-measure you, and start spacing them out. In that case, you can run out and charge it, tag a bunch of different units, take advantage of, if you watch our boy mob video, which how to use a boy mob, you can understand how to swing this 20-man boy unit and take advantage of the charge that you freely get from someone trying to block the stomp out from getting to the middle of the table. Of course, it's an abundance of OC. That way the enemy has to actually commit and can't just tag it and ignore you. Therefore, something of value of high OC and or killing potential has to be exposed. Boys, and you've now created space with that unit of boys by running up, charging from either clearing or just straight up tagging and creating space after killing the stuff that's in the way in the middle of the table. So people can't cheap chaff, and if they put something of value that the boys can't take down, now you have something valuable to shoot, and you can just tag up buildings within the way and continue to play and shoot the other side objective. So that's where the other 10-man unit of boys is on this play, is because you do still need to play and attempt to take over other objectives. The boys in this list, the 10-man unit will be moving to your non-committal side of the table. We'll say if it's a 5-objective mission, of course, you're fighting for the center. You're fighting for one objective, and the other one's your non-committal objective. That's where your 10-man unit of boys in this list will be going with the other truck. And you can even follow them with the Gretchen if you want a low and, I'm going to run up, tag, deny you primary. I'm going to run up, tag, deny you primary. That's very much the way you can do it because you didn't plan on holding it. On the other side of the table is where you're going to hold it, and that's where your Luda/Mega Nobs can be holding it down. Ludas can hold down the firing lane while your Mega Nobs stand on the objectives. If someone decides to tag it and stand on it, now your Ludas can overwatch the unit that tried to just tag the objective with your Mega Nobs and really do damage to them, possibly kill them off, or just not let them have enough OC to beat your Mega Nobs. And in that case, your Mega Nobs get to actually play the game and commit to primary. If not, they can run up to the middle and help dislodge something for the middle, and your storm boys and or bikers can move on to your other more committal objectives. But that's how this list would work in play. Of course, you can give or take. If you have more knobs can play as well. But this is really the archetype that I've been trying and testing out with my Stampa, and it felt pretty good. Do you need 30 boys? Necessarily no. Did I enjoy 20? I really did, as being able to swing and tag enemy units, block them out from the middle of the table, so that really when they just shot away my boys and charged the perimeter of that 20-man boys, they couldn't stack enough to cover the middle objective, and in that case my Stomper could actually move and touch the middle objective, and that changes the game for you, because then he can actually play and allow you to win the mission. The Storm Boys are very much for scoring. Of course, Nick Rock can make it on the list. The War Bikers are just another unit, but please keep in mind the Stomper can die easily. Therefore, that's why I'm so hard pressing the 20-man unit of boys. Act as also a screening protector shield from your Stomper as he's moving his way up the table and getting other lines of sight. So that's very much on you as the player. Can you get stomped by using the Stomper? Of course you can. But is it fun? Yes. And I strongly advise it. I strongly advise you going out there and playing it for fun. And if you're looking to try RTTs just because you want to get a bunch of different games in against people you never get to play in factions, it gives you an excuse to paint things up. Well, the Stomper list can be a way to do it for a somewhat reasonable cost and in your investment. As we all know, getting up to that threshold with points for Orks is kind of expensive sometimes, and this helps you fill it up. So I hope this helped you guys out to a little degree. I promise you the Stomper is very much playable, and this is how to start Orks with the Battleforce Stomper box. So now I'll take questions from the gits and see how y'all are doing. If I missed anything real quick, let's see. He said, I picked up the Stomper box because I didn't own Ludas, and now I have stuff that I can supplement with more list. I picked one up strictly to add the Stomper to my collection. It's just a bug, and it's that he makes an impact with the Dread Mob rules when getting that detachment breakdown. Where the detachment breakdown is looking like this Saturday could very much work. I'm thinking Dread Mob should go first. You know, a lot of people are very much excited for it, and there's a lot of different talk about what things to use. You know, a lot of people are just straight up, we'll just do killer cans, but hey, there might be some play with infantry. So he goes, I would have picked it up if I had the money for it. I might get the new combat patrol and finish that side of the army off. Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you're running that side of the army, Beastnaggers, go for the War Horde, in my opinion. Oh, Greg said, I got 2 sets as both my son and I are Ork players. 2 sets. That means you can run the legendary double Stomper list. And if you join our Discord, we can talk about that. Now, do I think it's awesome? Yes. Do I think it's going to win you games? No, I don't really know. I haven't tested it yet. But you could definitely run 2 Stompers. That's a real thing with a bunch of Grots. So you're a legend for that. You have trucks. You have a bunch of looters. That's actually really fun. And that model's hard to get. So I'm glad both you guys are able to get it. Good job by you, Greg. Good dad potential. He said, I did pick up the box. I split it with a friend who wanted a Stomper to start a Walker army. Well, shout out to your friend and you for going in on it. You know, I know me personally, I didn't get it because I already had a Stomper. I did get another, you know, and I almost regret it because I'm like, well, I like the Big Mac, but I didn't get it either. Maybe I should have. Maybe I'm having second guesses because I want to use the Stomper box, 2 Stomper list, but hey, I could just borrow a Stomper, I guess. As for you, trucks are nice, and I bet you feel good that you have access to the Big Mac. So good job there. He said, did we get a review on the hobby tactics? No, I messed up with that and didn't set it up yet, but that's where we are. I'll get back to that, I promise. And we have 5 WAAAGH Tactic gifted memberships from Wicked Joe. Whoa! Welcome to the Great WAAAGH, you gets. Anybody who collects those memberships, thank Joe. Be a member of the Great WAAAGH and turn into a squig. Well, runt. You start off as a runt, then a squig, and hopefully one day you could be a boy and maybe more. So shout out to Wicked Joe. I greatly appreciate your support. I'm glad you got your Stomper box. I hope you actually try to get a game in casual with your Stomper. I know when we played in person, you actually enjoyed seeing it, huh? I bought the Stomper to play a list with the Stomper and Nons. Yeah, dude, that's something I've always wanted to do since I first started 40K is run the trio. What I will say, my friend, is you have to understand that the Stomper doesn't eat most of your CP. So a lot of the combinations that you're going to be looking for here are not going to be able to go into play, as in for the Dread WAAAGH strats, right? And you're going to be playing probably for one of them an additional mech, most likely. But I'm going to be running that too, as it's very flavorful. It's about what else can we fit on the list and actually play the mission. I guess it's just all our grots, right, homie? So shout out to you, Music Drive, because, yeah, that's that's very flavorful, and I'm definitely enjoying running that. I got my stuff all painted up. It looks beautiful, and I'll be running that too. But for anybody who's new, you know, that would be quite a skew to play, and it would be hard to win those games, but it would feel really, really good, especially if you played against like a night play for fun. So yeah. So thank you everyone for this presentation. So going forward, we're going to be breaking down. We have a tier list video on Friday where we're going to have a special guest from the Team America team. So heck that, yeah, that's going to be great. We're going to break down each detachment, go into that, each unit, and so much more with this. I'm looking forward to just looking at the index as a whole, not necessarily breaking down what's the most competitive only, but as to how every detachment can be played and how every unit can be played to their maximum potential. Because I know that's really what the Ork community wants to see. You want to know how you can play with your toys and your boys to the highest degree and have the most fun with it. So we're in for a great edition, boys. It's one of the best codexes we've ever seen. Really, all of 40K has ever seen. So it's the rise of the green tide. And a lot of people are intimidated by us, but that's because they don't know what's coming. But there's one thing to keep in mind is don't cross our wall because we knock your teeth out. Whoa.